Hi, everybody. My name is Kira Ennis, and I'm the director and curator of Pitzer College Art Galleries. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today. This series of talks is a collaboration between the Office of Alumni and Family Engagement and part of the Pitzer at Home series. Before going ahead, I'd like to say a very big thank you to Brandon Kyle, the director of the Office of Alumni and Family Engagement, as well as to Brooke Butler for partnering with us. It's been a great series, and we're really enjoying it. Additionally, I'd like to give a very big thanks to Chris Michno, Exhibitions and Communications Manager, Pitzer College Art Galleries, for his help with every aspect of these events. Thank you, Chris. This series features graduates who have pursued careers in the arts. I should say Pitzer graduates. We have the great pleasure today of connecting with Marguerite Elliot, who is an artist based in the Bay Area. Marguerite graduated from Pitzer in 1971 with a BA in art and has been a practicing artist ever since. Today, she will be talking about her work in the context of the historic Women's Building project, which is both an independent art space and educational center dedicated exclusively to women artists during the years 1973 to 91. It was originally located in the MacArthur area of Los Angeles and later moved downtown. Historically, the Women's Building is one of the most important feminist art projects of the past 50 years, and we are thrilled to have Marguerite discuss the part she played in its evolution. Marguerite's talk will be in two halves. The first half will focus on the Women's Building and her work there, and the second half will focus on her current practice. At the end of the first half, there will be an opportunity to ask some questions, should you want to. That'll be in about 20 minutes. And there will also be an opportunity at the end to ask questions too. Just put them in chat and I'll be able to forward them on to Marguerite. Again, we are absolutely thrilled to welcome Marguerite Elliot back to Pitzer. Please join me in giving Marguerite a gigantic hand. I'm going to mute myself now.
All right, so I'm going to start my screen share. So thank you, Kara, so much for inviting me to be here today. So yeah, I wanted to thank all the women artists who sent me images of their work that I have included in my talk. And I was just one of many artists, women artists, who came through the Women's Building in the Feminist Studio Workshop from like 1973 onward. So what you're going to hear today, what I'm going to share with you today, is kind of my story and my experiences of what it was like for me and some of the women that I knew. But there are many, many more that came after me. I was one of 30 that came for the first year of the Feminist Studio Workshop and the Women's Building. So you might want to know where I came from before I came to Los Angeles. Well, first of all, I was at Pitzer, which was quite a journey for me to come from the East Coast back in 1967, jump on a plane. I'd never been to Pitzer. I had jumped on a plane by myself, never seen it. My parents said bye-bye. I flew out to LAX, took a bus from LAX with my suitcase and my teddy bear. I was like 18 or something. Went out to Pitzer, and Pitzer hadn't even finished being built at the time. So I was a little nervous and skeptical, but it was a great 4 years at Pitzer. I studied ceramics with Paul Soldner at Scripps College. So that's how I got in. That was my first experience with art. And from there, after I graduated, about 2 years later, I went to the Anderson Art Ranch, which was just starting. This is it up here, like way back then. It was very rustic, just a couple barns. And I worked in the ceramics lab and taught ceramics there. So somewhere along the way, I had seen a poster with Judy Chicago, Arlene Raven, and Sheila de Bretteville talking about this feminist program, this new, brand new feminist program, first ever, that was going to be in Los Angeles in 1973. And at the time, I kind of realized that, A, women weren't getting shown The world of ceramics was very macho and women were not getting teaching positions. So I said, screw that. I am going to go to Los Angeles and see what this is all about, this feminist program. So at the end of the summer, I had been living in my teepee, which is down here, lovely, lovely spot on the mountainside overlooking Aspen Valley before it got developed. I've been living in my teepee for that summer. I packed up my potter's wheel and my dog in my Econoline van, my 18-foot teepee poles. I strapped them to the top of my van and took off for LA, thinking that I could put my teepee up in Griffith Park. I was a little naive at the time, but what the heck. So I did realize that I couldn't put it up in Griffith Park and moved on from there. So these are our wonderful founders. This is Arlene Raven. She's an art historian. And she was a woman who really talked to us about, women artists from the past, because back then, nobody told us that there were women artists from the past. That big book of, was it Jansen that came out, and they didn't have any, this person had not included any women artists in it. It was pretty crazy. So she told us all about this cool stuff, all these cool women in the past. This is Judy Chicago. Everybody knows her. And she was a real pistol. And Sheila Levrant de Bretteville, over in the right designer, they founded the Women's Building. They brought us all to LA. Well, we got to LA, we got there, we met in Sheila's house, only to find out that, hey, they hadn't found a building for us yet. We were meeting in, so everyone was pretty pissed because we all came from just seeing these posters. There's no internet back then, just seeing these posters put up in a couple of different colleges around the country. We dropped what we were doing, jobs, school, whatever, and met, all come out to LA for this brand new thing, only to find out, hey, there's no studios and no women's building. So we were kind of pissed about the whole thing. What were we, where's that money going? Well, fortunately, within a week, they did find a building. It was the old Chenard building in MacArthur Park, which was a pretty seedy area, but the building itself was really super duper. This is an old thing. And we're all rushing in, woohoo, only to find out that the place was totally empty. And guess who got the job of building it? Well, it was us. We learned how to put up drywall, sheetrock, how to sand the floors. We built the studios. We built about 4 galleries with lighting. There was a bookstore and a coffee shop, among other things. So it was big, and it held us all, and we could have events there, and it was pretty cool. And we all learned how to use tools, including me, and that kind of helped me going forward, using tools in my work currently for years afterwards, because I'm a welder. And what one of the women did was they painted all of the tools were kind of intimidating for a lot of people. So we painted them pink, and it made it much easier. So this is the front hall, front entryway of the women's building. This is Sheila Levrant de Bretteville and Arlene here greeting people. And how we saw the women's building was that it was a public center for women's culture, welcoming everybody. This is at probably one of the first openings that we had. This is my friend Maria Karras, a photographer. And this is me over on the left, where I was still a hippie back then, with my long skirt and long hair. And that's the last time you'll see me with long hair. But we were having a good time. So what we started out doing was having critiques right away, discussing what is feminist art, why are we doing this, and what do we want to say? And up until then, most of the art then was abstract expressionist or minimalism, and it didn't speak to any issues that were pertinent to us. So we decided that to make art about our own experiences, what was important to us. So we had many crits, and some of them were quite heated too. It wasn't all, super friendly, but we managed. See a very serious critique, and this is me here looking very serious at this art here. And we had lots and lots of meetings about, we had consciousness raising meetings all the time. It was mandatory for a while. And we did have fun. We, you know, people got in their costumes, we'd have dances, and we had a good time. We worked hard building the building, we worked hard on our art, we worked hard having very difficult discussions sometimes about where we wanted to go with our art. Also, I wanted to say that like 2 years before, or maybe a year before the building got started, there had been a big retrospective or a big survey show out at LACMA, which included, for Los Angeles, didn't include one woman artist. So yeah, we were out to change things. And, you know, we didn't want, I'm just gonna say this, we didn't want a piece of the pie. We wanted to make a whole new pie that talked about us and what was relevant to us. Here is Lucy Lapard. She's, all the artists here know who she is. She's a feminist art critic that's super famous and super well known, and an author, and Judy Chicago, and there they are discussing work. Lucy Lapard loved what we were doing and came to the Women's Building often to discuss women's art. And here she is. This is Lucy Lapard. We're celebrating the first year at the Women's Building, and this is me waiting here for a piece of cake. Love that cake. So we had lots of openings. Like I said, we had at least 4 galleries there, that really, really nice galleries, and with rotating shows all the time. And we had many, many well-known artists come through and look at the work, show their work. This is Anna Eastman here, the author, and Judy Chicago. Anna East gave us a talk about, you know, her books. And I think I have a signed copy of one of her books, actually, and what it meant to be a woman writer. Here is, oh, we had a one-person show of Imogene Cunningham's work. You know, she talked to us about photography. Lily Tomlin came often and gave wonderful fundraising events for us and provided much laughter and joy. Kate Millett, well-known feminist and author from New York, came out and did a month-long residency where they made all these great women's bodies, and one of them they put on top of the Women's Building. You know, and very different from typical women's bodies that you see men doing. These are hefty, buxom women, you know, proud and strong. This is Mary Del Lesueur, artist, and, no, excuse me, she's a writer, poet, and activist, giving a workshop about writing to all of us. So this was just a fraction of the women who came through. We had Angela Davis. I couldn't find a picture of Angela Davis, but Angela Davis came and talked to us about her new book. Who else? Jane Fonda. I mean, a lot of poets. It just goes on and on. We were so lucky. I had no idea how lucky we were to see all these women, extraordinary women, come and share their experience with us. Because in regular school, you don't get this kind of stuff. I mean, you just don't. This is a poster that Sheila DeBretteville did the first or second year I was there. She asked women to, using these pink Post-it notes, to write their feelings about pink. And she was going to make a poster of it. So at the time, you know, pink was considered childish, girlish. Nobody wanted to wear pink. It was like, oh no, it's little Cinderella or whatever. So this is, pink is childish. I'm not pink now. I hate pink. This is me with a Valentine's heart. I'm holding that, one of those box of candies that you get at Valentine's Day full of chocolates, and it's all red. And here I'm holding a knife, looking at you like, don't mess with me. Wonderful. On that poster, by the way, has been reproduced in book after book after book. It was so cool to like pick it up in museum in Denmark and see Sheila's poster there. So this is one of the first performances that happened at the Women's Building. And I did this performance with Ann Phillips and Cheryl Swanwick, with the title being Victim to Victory. And the theme of that performance and installation was based on a time, like early on in the Women's Building, the first couple of months, I think, Cheryl and I were closing up the building at night. We were standing at a side door facing a parking lot that was all dark. And these two were just locking up for the night. And two cops drove in and started asking us what we were doing there. It was obvious we weren't robbing the place. There's nothing to rob there. We were just two women, young women in their early, I was 23 at the time, 24. And they didn't like our answers. They thought we were cheeky. And this is, if any of you are from Los Angeles, you'll know that, you'll recognize that these were from the Rampart Police Station, which was notorious at that time for being rough and violent. And I'm not sure that we knew that at the time, but we knew that the police were suspicious of activities at the Women's Building, as was the fire department. They'd come by and check to see if we were in code. And these folks were kind of suspicious. We were man haters, bra burners, dykes, lesbians, whatever thing they could throw at us, because they were just threatened by what are all these women doing here? You know, making art and, you know, whatever. So the long story, so the cops didn't like what we were saying. They didn't like our attitudes. My friend Cheryl looked like a very butch dyke. I probably still had my long hair at the time. And what they did was they pushed us inside the building so nobody from the street could see us and beat us up. And they, with their sticks and with their fists, and they beat us in, like, on the back and places that you couldn't see the bruises that much. So we were, of course, traumatized by the whole thing and decided to do, months later, a performance to kind of get rid of that feeling of victimization. And this is part of the performance where we're sitting around a circle. This is me standing over Cheryl, and here I am cutting the bonds of shame that, you know, you feel when you've been brutalized and traumatized by the cops who you're supposed to be protecting of you, and they weren't. So I felt very tender about this whole thing. It was a very difficult time in my life. I had no idea how much it affected me, but it did. And when the Kavanaugh hearings came up, man, it really triggered all that stuff about women not being believed. We tried to sue them, or at least take the cops to court. And of course, they said that they would make the charges much worse, like battery or some things, if we could hurt the cops. So this is a performance by Meg Harlem, who did a lot of performance and dance around body imagery. And she's channeling, like, the female creators at the time. She's doing this in front of Faith Wilding's drawings here in the back, and we were watching her, you know, in the gallery. So performance became a big thing at the Women's Building because it was an easier way to kind of get our expressions out and to address important topics. So we addressed, you know, topics of incest, violence, rape, I mean, all kinds of stuff that were heretofore unmentionable. So this one is a year-long incest project. And in the poster here, it says, once upon a time, she thought incest was something she had to carry around all by herself. Which at the time, nobody talked about incest. You weren't allowed to. And even now, people don't have a hard time talking about incest. So here she is carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders because of her incest experience and have hide it. So women came together and for a year-long project, and they talked about their incest experience, made art about it, had an exhibition about it, had it written about. And here it is in the LA Times talking about the still taboo subject, feminist art show seeks to bring incest out of the closet. So a lot of the performances we did got press coverage, which was great. So it was kind of taking art out of the studio, out of this preciousness of paintings hung on white walls. We tackled tough subjects and got it out there in the public. This is a wonderful group called Mother Art that got started like right away at the Women's Building. And what happened was that out of the 30-some artists that came the first year, there was about 4 or 5 maybe that were mothers and had kids. I mean, obviously had kids, their mothers had kids, young kids. And the rest of us were single, were unmarried, and didn't have a clue about what it was like to be a mother and what, you know, the responsibilities were. So we had this rule in the first month or so as we were building the building, getting things set up, and then having shows, that we could have dogs in the building, because a lot of people had dogs. That dogs were okay, but no kids. So these women got pretty upset that, hey, dogs were allowed, but no kids. What's with that? So they started a group amongst themselves and decided, hey, we're going to change this attitude. Of course, you know, we were wrong in saying that and totally unenlightened, and changed our tune pretty fast. So they got together, started doing performances about motherhood. They built this wonderful play structure out in the parking lot for their kids. Then they started doing these performances in laundromats all over the city. It's called Laundry Works. And here's some of the embroidered pillowcases that they made to hang in the laundromats. And they were illustrating women's job of, you know, doing laundry and, you know, cleaning up, taking care of the family. And during this time, they got a grant from the government for $700 to do this project. And it was an NEA grant back in the day when they used to give out grants to artists. Well, people in the government, our Congress got pretty upset that, oh my God, we're spending $700 to do this art that's going about motherhood and going in laundromats. What a horror. So that was the start of the end of artists getting grants. I mean, other wild things were going on that, you know, Congress didn't approve of in terms of giving grants, but that was one of them. $700 is absolutely absurd. So after they did that, they did this project called Cleaning Up. So they decided they needed to clean up the government. So they did performances in front of City Hall, you know, sweeping and cleaning up. They had to clean up the banks because those were corrupt as well. And here's some other government buildings over here. So, and then I think one of the final performances that they did was they did a video of some of their work and performances in a washing machine. How appropriate. So this is Maria Karras, my friend and photographer. She does a lot of documentary photography. She did these wonderful, she did this wonderful project where she created posters. This is one of them down here, and installed them in buses, in the LA RTD buses. They went into 1,000 buses all over town, and then got a great write-up by Suzanne Munchnick, the art critic there in the LA Times. And what she did was she interviewed women from different nationalities that had immigrated to LA. That's why it's called Both Here and There. So they have one foot in their lives here and one foot in their culture. And they talked about what that was like. And this is the famous artist Judy Baca, a Chicana artist who employed, I don't know, hundreds of youth from East LA, at-risk youth from East LA, to do this mural. And she was able to get grants to do that. And they have this, I think it's like a mile-long mural in Los Angeles now. It was a wonderful project. And what Maria did was she had the women that she interviewed of all different nationalities in their native language on this side, and then in English on this side. And I can imagine, you know, sitting in these buses, if you're one of the women or women from a different nationality, and seeing yourself reflected in these posters overhead as you're riding along in the bus. Great project. Suzanne Lacey and Leslie Laboritz-Starwitz did this project called, performance called In Mourning and in Rage. And it was about the Hillside Strangler back in like 1977, 76. I'm not sure when he started strangling. He strangled prostitutes and he probably raped them and strangled them. And the police weren't doing a whole lot to catch this guy because it was going on for a while. So she did this performance in front of City Hall with this poster, this banner in the back called In Memory of Our Sisters, Women Fight Back. So it wasn't just about being victims. It was like, you know, we're not taking this, we're fighting back, man. Very strong imagery here. And each of these women represented one of the women who was raped and strangled, prostitutes who were raped and strangled. And they say her name and they talk about who she was, giving her a voice. Later on in the year, Suzanne did a project called 3 Weeks in May, where she had this huge map of LA and it was down at City Hall, and she recorded all the rapes that happened in LA over a 3-week period and put a stamp on the map of where it happened. And then on the side, she had the story about that woman. She probably didn't say their name, but what had happened and some of the circumstances of the rape. So this is Susan Mogul with a video called Take Off. And this is a spin-off or reaction to Vito Acconci's famous masturbation video. So here's, which is so male. And this is Susan in her early 20s talking about vibrators and out on the table here and how many batteries she's used over the past year on her vibrators. And she talks about, you know, very female and this very disarming way and kind of bringing to light the whatever about vibrators and making fun of the Vito Acconci performance. A performance group called the Waitresses. This is the Great Goddess Diana, which is part of a bigger performance called Get Ready to Order. So what they took, this is some of the women who were at the Women's Building and part of the Feminist Studio Workshop were waitresses. That's how they supported themselves. So the whole point, part of the point of the Waitresses was to discuss and bring to light sexual harassment, wages, food production, and other issues that waitresses face. And they did this as a performance at the Women's Building, and then they did it in cafes all over Los Angeles. This is another performance that the Waitresses did during a big event that we had called Target LA, the Art of Survival. And the whole Target LA Art of Survival group was about anti-nuclear proliferation. And we had there was about 100 of us, and I was one of the founders for the Artists for Survival. And there were about 100 artists that got together to make art about nuclear proliferation. And we took over a huge 3-story empty parking garage in downtown LA for, I don't know, about 4 days over a long weekend, and did performances and installations, which you'll see in the background. We got a lot of press coverages. So the Waitresses did this wonderful performance called The Waitresses' Easy 3-Step Guide to Food Preparation in the Event of a Nuclear Attack. So I don't know if any of you remember the duck and cover scenario that was going on back then, but this is duck and these are the covers. They're doing a little dance around duck and cover in case of a nuclear attack. During that time, I saw this great political cartoon by Paul Conrad in the LA Times. And it was called The Administration's Civil Defense Plan for Nuclear War. And what happened was during Reagan's administration, you know, he was talking about Star Wars and putting nuclear bombs up in these satellites that would circle around the globe, and you could drop them anytime you felt like it. And one of his wonderful cabinet members was saying, well, hey, when everyone was getting kind of nervous about this scenario, he said, oh, don't worry about it. If there's a nuclear attack, all you need is a shovel. You can dig yourself a shelter and stay there until, whatever blows over. So it's absolutely ludicrous, of course. So I decided to do a performance around it, an installation. So these are 50 shovels, with crosses on them, take off from the Paul Conrad cartoon, called Shovel Defense, A Grave Mistake. So this is me. We're in front of City Hall. And in the background here is a group called Sisters for Survival. And they were women from the women's nuns outfits to do these performances in and around the shovels. We did it in front of City Hall, and we also did it at various locations around Los Angeles. These are the Sisters of Survival running around and ducking and covering just in case, for when the bomb drops. We were fortunate to get a lot of press coverage on this one. This is Channel 9, one of the major networks in LA, and it was covered that night on all the major networks in Los Angeles. We also got a lot of coverage in newspapers, the Village Voice, the LA Times, New York Times, and Washington Post. That was great. And back then it was a lot easier to get press coverage. It wasn't quite so flooded the way it is these days. And it was wonderful because it was able to get our ideas out there in the public in an artistic way. This is an article about it in Lucy Lapard, in the Village Voice, and this was in a Spanish newspaper. So it hit a lot of people, which was great, absolutely wonderful. So the sisters went on tour and all over Europe, talking with people, doing performances on the street. And this was one in England. And then they came back and they had a big show in a gallery, with all the, writing about their experiences on their tour. And this is a piece I did at the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena. And at the time, and probably California Institute of Technology, people there, they're all scientists, and, they were making, satellites and the technology for these rockets and whatnot that could bring us all destruction, as well as other things, space stuff and all that. So I thought, oh, this would be a great audience to do an installation for. So this is a banner that I hung from one of their towers, one of the tall buildings there, called End the Race, like the nuclear race, or the arms race, or End the Race, meaning humans. End the race or end the race. And in front of this building was this beautiful reflection pool, which I floated silhouettes of people and kids, children, and dogs. And then these are some zombies in the background here. And these are the images floating in the pool. And these are some shadows that are reminiscent of the shadows that happened when people were obliterated in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And these are the people in Tyvek suits that are left to clean up the mess with their gas masks. From there, I did some installations around the issue of homelessness. I was in the bowels of downtown for probably about 15 years before it got gentrified. And there still are a lot of people homeless in LA, but back then, they were all around my studio and all over the place. So I decided to do some pieces that talked about that issue of homelessness. This is called On the Street. And they had a little fire going. It really moved me when I would see them at night hovering around fires. to keep warm. These are casts of people, and then I resined them and painted them. And this is a piece called Street Harvest, where I interviewed two guys that pretty much lived right outside my studio, really nice guys, Joe and Larry. I interviewed them about their life on the street, what it was like for them, and took portraits of them, photographic portraits of them, and recorded their stories. So, and this is then I did a big dumpster filled with, trash, because they would go to the trash cans, the dumpsters, and pull out cardboard and glass and aluminum cans and haul in their shopping carts and take them over to get money for them to recycle them. And I recorded their voices. And when I showed this piece up in San Francisco, I had a recording of their voices in the dumpster. So when people walked by, they could hear what Larry and Joe were saying, as well as seeing their faces, on the wall. This is my husband, Mark, who I was kind enough to let me do a plaster cast of him. I could not actually invite the homeless folks, Larry and Joe, into my studio for obvious reasons to do casts of them. So I used friends. So he's cast in plaster, coated with resin, and everything's painted black. This is a piece here of the kids, an installation about the children who are by themselves on the street corners in Los Angeles. I don't know if they're still there, but when I was there in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they would stand on these street corners in downtown and all over by themselves selling flowers. And they looked so vulnerable, and it felt so unsafe to me. This is a piece in progress here. So, okay, so that's it for this part of the thing about, this part of my talk about what went on at the Women's Building. Do you have any? I'd like to take a few questions, one or two, before I go on. And what I'm going to do is from here, talk about my work after that, as well as some of the women artists I knew that I know now that are still doing important work, just a couple of them that I know from the Women's Building who are still doing work about various issues like trafficking and other things. So are there any short questions before I go on?
I have one.
Okay.
Can we get your book on Amazon?
Oh, of course. Yeah, I forgot. I was going to put the link in chat. That's my sister, Lois. Hi, Lois. So, yeah, thanks so much for having it. I'm at an artist residency right now. So what you see, so I don't have the book with me, but yeah, it's called, what's it called? The Feminist, what's it called?
The Women's Building and Feminist Art Education, 1973 to 1991, Pictorial Herstory. It's filled with photographs, a gazillion photographs. It's so fun.
Yeah. So that's available on Amazon. My friend Maria and I did that for the Pacific Standard show a couple years ago.
It doesn't show up that well on the screen, does it?
No, it doesn't, but that's the gist of it. So, well, thank you. All right, Red Wing, I see you. Hi, Red Wing was there. Yes.
I was there in 74 and 75, and I have to say, Marguerite, I am like in tears and laughter alternating with your slides. And just thank you so much. I mean, it just brings back incredible memories. Seeing people who I haven't seen in all these years makes you want to have a reunion of the Women's Building. It was an amazing place for me. I studied with Dina Metzger and did a lot of writing, and I am still a writer because of that. And it was just such a powerful place. And I guess, my question for you is, where do you see the impact is now of all of the work of feminism and art? I mean, I'm so aware that here in San Francisco, there was supposed to be a retrospective of Judy Chicago's this spring that, because of COVID, it's not happening. But I still feel like most people still don't know enough about women artists in the world.
Interesting. Good question. Yeah, I don't think they do. So, I mean, it's gotten a lot better. Instead of maybe with galleries showing 10% women, maybe now it's 30%. And women still don't make the same amount of money selling their work as men do. So there's still a lot of disparities. Yeah, a lot. But I mean, it has gotten better. But yeah. So Jan's an artist. And yeah, she can say, Jan, do you think it's gotten better over time?
I'm not really sure, Marguerite. I think maybe that there's more awareness of women artists, and I think it's kind of slowly gotten better. But as you pointed out, women artists are still treated unfairly when it comes to the amount of money that their work goes for versus male artists. And I think anytime a man and a woman do the same type of work, usually the male's artist or the male's work is valued more for whatever reason. It's just systemic misogynistic ideas that we have about women's work.
Yeah. So I think we still have a ways to go. And I think there's more women who are curators now and run galleries and whatnot, but we still have a long ways to go.
Right. There are still a lot of women who are curators and run galleries, but oftentimes they're supporting the male artist more
I know.
than the women artists.
Systemic sexism or whatever.
Yes, exactly.
Kara.
Yeah. Hi, Marguerite. I'm really enjoying this talk so much. I had a particular question about the 3 Weeks in May performance, which I'm sure you must have been part of, which was, a collaboration, as far as I understand, with the LAPD. And I'm wondering, how did the LAPD respond to the idea of this collaboration? Did it have any impact on police culture within that particular precinct? I think I know the answer, but I thought I'd ask anyway.
I don't know. And I don't think it was in collaboration with them. I think she got special permission to do this project up at City Hall. I don't think the police had anything to do with it, honestly. She just recorded, somehow she was able to find out the rapes that happened within this 3-week period. And where they happened, actually part of the performance was doing an outline. She'd go to the site where it happened and outline the woman's body on the sidewalk. So it made it very visual at that space. So yeah, I don't think the police were involved in, So,
I have a question.
Okay, let's do one more and then we should go on.
Hi, I have a question. My name is Jessica. I'm a Pitzer student. Thank you for coming today. So my question, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. Okay, so this is kind of to do with something that I read over the weekend, but with Bell Hooks. So she says that we're so enamored by the oppressor's face that we can't turn away, we can't say no to certain images. So I wonder, by participating or critiquing the framework of the patriarchy, how we can refocus our time as rather than a reactionary form of resistance, to create some sort of revolutionary boycott that's even more so outside of the bounds of the patriarchy. So I think that comes from creating more work and creating things that are framed through the oppositional gaze rather than as a response. But I'm curious what you think.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I said that we didn't want to have a piece of the pie. We wanted to create our own pie. So we wanted to talk about things that mattered to us and to other women. So yeah, rather than be, just react, it was this is what's important to us and we're going to talk about it. So.
Yeah, can I just say something in response to Jessica's comment? I think that when you're in the throes of that environment, as we were in 1973, I mean, and still today, but particularly in 1973, because it was so immediate at that point. I think that you had to address the oppressors, and now I think that a lot of women are forging their own ways in their careers as artists, and not centering on the oppressor or oppressive systems, but we're still aware of it.
You can't help but be aware of it.
Right, right. And I think that
Millett girls, I think, are still doing some great work around all that. So shall we move on? Let me tell you about, let's go on to just a PowerPoint. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So when did I learn how to weld? I moved up to Northern California 25 years ago. And I'd been welding when I was in Los Angeles, but I just kept going. This is me welding. I love the sparks. After a trip to Japan, where I was really enamored, I just fell in love with Shinto shrines there and became very aware of how the Japanese revere nature. And I grew up in the country. I do a lot of hiking. I live in an area in Marin County where it's easy to go hiking. So I really relate to nature. So I started doing pieces around using leaves, and here they are enclosed, but some are fallen out, and they're either trapped or preserved. And these are all seed pods here. I know they're hard to see, but they're all seed pods that I found, various times during my hikes. And these are magnolia leaves that are entrapped in a spine. And magnolia leaves are magnolia trees are very, very old, ancient trees that have been around long before we were here. So I did a lot of work around using seed pods, kinds of an imagery, the symbolism of like new beginnings, but also around issues of after we destroy all our plants, trees, whatever, what's going to be left? Are we going to go into museums and see, oh, this is a seed from, such and such a tree that was extinct in, 2002 or whatever. We have lost 30% of our species are in flora and fauna since 1970. So this is kind of memorializing them, but also I string them up so they're vulnerable. These are bronze, and these are intertwined, kind of connoting a relationship between the two. They're vulnerable, but yet strong. They're encased in this wire around them, so you can see in, but they can't get out. So it could be like imprisoned, trapped, but this is what you're left to look at when everything else is gone. This is the process of bronze pouring, which is super cool, hugely time consuming, and some bronze seed pods. And then a couple of years ago, I started doing artist residencies. This is a piece I did when I was in the Arctic in Finland, just north of the Arctic Circle at this artist residency in Kemijärvi. It was a beautiful, beautiful place. Oh my God, these immense forests that stretch on forever. Hardly anybody's up there. Just super quiet. And I was influenced by these cell phone towers. I did this 4-day road trip on myself from the bottom of the Arctic Circle up to the very top, as far as you could go before you run into the Bering Sea, and which is actually Norway. And I was dependent on cell phone towers for my GPS because these roads are very desolate and hardly anybody's out on these roads, and no gas station, hardly any gas stations, hardly any towns. So I was very dependent on these cell phone towers. So I started doing a series called Sentinels, so these reference cell phone towers that kept me connected and communication wise and all that, but yet are somewhat of a blight on our landscape. So there's kind of a yin yang thing going on. And I came across some imagery of the Samis, S-A-M-I, which are the original folks in the Arctic. They are the Laplanders, which they call themselves the Samis. And this is the earth goddess for the Samis. And I put her at the top, sending out good energy. And I see my sentinels as sort of watchtowers. They bear witness to what's going on in this world. They stand guard. This is one I did at a residency last year in Denmark. And I used a Nordic theme. It's called Nordic Sentinel in Search of a Safe Harbor. So this is symbolic of a Viking ship, because they're very much into Vikings there. And this is the goddess Freya. I like to have a goddess at the top. And she is searching for a safe harbor. And she's a goddess of love and peace, the Nordic goddess of love and peace. And I did this at the time of the Kavanaugh hearings. So I kept thinking, where is a safe harbor to go? Where is it safe? You know, for us as a culture, for us as women. And these are arms. This is a gold leaf here at the top. And these are leaves that are hanging down, and this part spins around with the wind. And the leaves kind of direct us back to the ground. So, you know, the energy goes up, but also we're directed towards the ground, and we're dependent on life, you know, from the trees, from nature. This is one that I did back at home, another sentinel with a spider imagery that was symbolic of the Hopi spider grandmother. And the Hopis have this wonderful myth that the grandmother spider brought light to the earth and helped mankind solve his problems. And we sure need that now, don't we? And also, it's reminiscent, or it brought back memories for me of Louise Bourgeois' wonderful spider sculptures that are all over the world now. And again, I have a leaf that's hanging on a thin wire that spins around in the wind. So you have this nice kinetic element. And I'm using red here and 23 karat gold leaf up there. These are like sacred colors. And this is a piece that is in a sculpture park in Salem, New York, from when I did a residency there at the Cary Hill Sculpture Park. And during COVID, I did a sister piece here in California. And during the lockdown in April, they asked me to install it in downtown Fairfax, where the mayor said it brought hope and just uplifted people's spirits. And again, this part spins around, she spins around, and we have leaves. And this is all 23 karat gold leaf. And the cool thing is now there are photographs of her in Tehran. So I've always wanted to go to Tehran, and now's my chance. It's there now in an exhibition sponsored by an organization in Tehran and a sister organization here in the States called Weed Women Echo something or other Artist Dialogue. This is the piece that's in New York. I did this first, and then I did the one in California. These are my sentinels keeping watch at night, guarding over us. These are installed across the street from my house. And Maver, who was in the waitress group in Los Angeles in the 70s, has done this incredible painting, multimedia installation talking about her ancestors. And it's called I Am My White Ancestors, Claiming the Legacy of Oppression. And what she did is she researched her ancestors all the way back and looked at what their lives were like. This is her portrait in front of each one. She dressed up in their costumes and photographed herself in front of a scene where they would be. And what she said, which was incredible, she wanted to see their role in the history of race, class, colonization, and genocide. So, and she has the audio diaries as well that reveal the historical events and traumas that shaped each ancestor and caused them to act out oppressively. So she really embodied the spirits of these ancestors to discover, you know, what caused, you know, this continuing racism and genocide and colonization, and how, you know, we're still doing that today. Jerry Allen, who is also an artist that I know from the Women's Building, and she was in the Waitresses and several other performance groups back then. She's doing this great project now called Hidden in Plain Sight, Human Trafficking. She's doing it in Los Angeles and Philadelphia. So she's talking about trafficking takes many forms. It's not just sex trafficking. It's, you know, house workers, it's manicurists, it's our farm workers, it's all over. And we just can't see it because you just don't know who's being trafficked and who's not. So she's doing this project where she does these postcards talking about what is trafficking, and there might be like a helpline on it on here, a place where you can get more information about the trafficking. And she's distributing those in Los Angeles and Philadelphia. And she's making these posters for bus benches that talk about different kinds of trafficking and how to get information about it, to bring, you know, awareness to the public of, well, hey, you know, there's a lot of this going on. The waitress group is still operating. They were invited to do a piece at the Crystal Bridges Museum of Art in Arkansas. They have some stuff up in some work up in a show there, as well as in their cafe. And they did this wonderful placemat. Women of Wonder, superpowers, Wonder Waitress. This must be a job for Wonder Waitresses. So what they're talking about is the demand for healthy food, combating sexual harassment, deconstructing stereotypes of what, you know, waitresses should be, and forming work alliances with other groups. So in 2019, because of the hard work of many of people from the Women's Building in terms of archiving the work from that time period, the Getty made a decision to archive it, to gather together work by the women artists from that time period and put it in their archive. So it's available for history. This is Mary Miller, who was the first female director of the Getty Research Institute. She came out from Yale, where Sheila DeBretteville, who's right here, founding mother of the Women's Building, is also the first. She's the first dean of the School of Design, I think, at Yale. So we had a big celebration at the Getty. This is me with Sherry Gawkey being honored for our work, our artwork, as well as our involvement and leadership in the Artists for Survival group. And this is me and my friend Maria with our book. This is now in the archives at the Getty Research Institute, and it's available on Amazon. As well as, also I wanted to say all these other groups like the Waitresses, Sisters for Survival, and Mother Art all have books about, they all did publish books about their work that's also available on Amazon. And here we are at the end, after what, 45 years or so, still celebrating women's accomplishments and women's art. So thank you so much for being here today and listening, and your great questions. And we can have more questions now. If you want to reach me, this is my email address if you have any more questions, and this is my website. There you go. So again, thanks so much, Kira, for inviting me here. And if we have any anybody else has questions or comments, put them in the chat or raise your hand and Kira will call on you. I want to say hi to Lisa. Lisa's an alumni from Pitzer.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you. Whoops. Sorry, Lisa, please go ahead. Lisa, please talk.
She was just waving.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
It's such a wonderful talk, and I recognize so many names, but I come from the writer and then theater and guerrilla theater using symbol in my work. So this was so interesting for me. But I wondered, you know, especially in your later early work, that the issues are still here, you know, the nuclear, the homeless, and do you get frustrated? Or I mean, it seems like you've kind of leaned your work a little bit more environmental and ritualistic right now, but do you get frustrated when you have same issues that still haven't been resolved? Or what's your attitude about that?
Yeah, it still sucks, man. That we still have so much homelessness, and it's probably gotten worse. It's horrible. You know, and the crazy people we have in Washington, you know, at the military, and yeah, it's still bad.
So it's frustrating, but it gives you energy to keep going, or does it make you feel despairing?
I don't feel too much despair. I mean, I feel despair more about climate change. You know, having, you know, gone through, you know, those horrible fires in Northern California and what's happening in California. I think if, you know, it's hard for me to, I'm a very positive person and upbeat and optimistic, but I do feel like, you know, climate change is a huge crisis, and none of us are going to survive if we don't get a handle on that. None of us, whether you're homeless or getting raped or whatever it is, or women getting discriminated against. You know, I think we're just in a whole lot of big trouble unless we can turn it around pretty fast. And honestly, I don't see, I don't even want to go there, but thank you.
Anyway, thanks for your wonderful work. It was a wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you, Claire. It's good to see you.
Do we have any more questions for Marguerite? Any more questions?
Yeah, Marguerite, where do you see your work going in the future as it evolves from what you've been doing currently?
It seems like I've been more into like doing public work. Although that's a little bit harder to do, but I like doing big pieces. I like doing tall pieces. I like the idea of communication. I like the idea of, you know, bringing attention to the environment, you know, one way or the other. And I think from all these years, since, you know, the Women's Building, it feels important to have a voice and to be heard and to feel strongly about an issue, to speak up and say something about it. So yeah, I don't know. You never know where things are going to lead you, but I love putting my work out in public and hearing people get, you know, that are uplifted by it. And it really was really heartwarming for me to see it in Fairfax and hear people talking about it and share it with me. And also when it's just up across the street and people in the neighborhood are walking by and we stop and talk about it and talk about, you know, some of the issues and stuff. And it's really cool. It's so different than having it in a gallery, a precious piece in a gallery, you know, on the wall for somebody to take home, you know, and then you never see it again. It's a different feeling. So I'm grateful to have the opportunity to travel and to be influenced by art around the world and to have my pieces up. You know, I think they all speak to each other. I think the one in the Arctic is communicating to us in California and bounces around. I just like it. So thank you. Good question. You're muted, hon. Lois, you're muted. You have to unmute.
Am I unmuted now? I have to say that your piece in the square in Fairfax makes a lot of sense because people drive by there and it's in the community. So it's nice to have pieces in parks and here and there and that. But if you have it right right? In small communities where everybody's driving by, you get discussion going. And it's a symbol, right? In the village where people live, if you know what I mean. Fairfax is small. I don't know. Am I making any sense? I just think that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, it is nice to have it. Yeah, in a public place. It's more public than a sculpture park.
Yeah, I mean, well, the sculpture parks are good too, but when it's in a square, like in a small community, people are driving by, walking by, talking about what the heck is that? And then you have a sign explaining what it's about, and you get discussion going. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. Thank you.
Well, I think that's the continued legacy of your time at the Women's Building. You've always been engaged with putting your work out in the public. I mean, even your homeless work, when it was up in San Francisco, that was 1984, while the Democratic Convention was being held in Los Angeles, and Mrs. Mondale came by in a public art gallery and publicized it. And, you know, it's been very moving. You've always been connected with the critical issues of the day.
Thank you. Back then I didn't know it. I just did it, you know, and it wasn't until much later that I thought, oh yeah, that homelessness is still with us and it's still important to talk about it. So, any other questions?
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
As your sister?
Okay. Yes.
Growing up in a very conservative community in Virginia.
We did, yeah.
How did you get from where we grew up to how'd you get there?
An airplane.
And what role did Pitzer play in the process?
What?
And what role did Pitzer play in the process of transformation
Oh,
from growing
gosh.
up in small town Virginia to evolving into the bowels of downtown Los Angeles and public art?
Oh my goodness. That's well, yeah, as my sister said, Lois said, it was super conservative, super Southern. You know, slavery was the good old days. Pre-Civil War was the good old days. And I was just tired of it. You know, I was just tired of it. I went to this repressive boarding school. We were locked up in Connecticut. Lois and I were there. And after that, I fled to California. Fled, never looked back. And it just opened my eyes. And Pitzer was wild. You know, it was unconventional. It was experimental. Social stuff was going on there. And it's different now. It's even like probably even 100 times better than when I was there. I haven't been back, but there it's so much environmental work going on there now, right, Kara? A lot of environmental stuff. Yes. And it was just a great opportunity to be completely different environment than I was in my hometown back in Virginia. And it just totally opened my eyes. And Pitzer was just great. It was very expansive learning process for me. So yeah, it was great. But it was also sheltered in a bit, and the Claremont was small. I mean, Pitzer was only 3,000 students. And then you could take classes at all these the Claremont colleges, Pomona, Harvey Mudd, whatever, Scripps. So it was nice. It was kind of perfect going from a small boarding school to a small college, but very expansive and taking all these classes. It was California, for Pete's sake, you know, in the 70s with, oh, I know also it was, you know, Surf's Up, man. That was the Beach Boys. So even though we were 100 miles from the beach, it was sort of an influence as well. So yeah, and it was a great time in California back then in the 60s and 70s. I was lucky to be there, and you were there too. But, so yeah, it was fun. So that, yeah, I'm grateful for my time at Pitzer.
So are there any more questions for Marguerite? Was that somebody? No? Okay. I just want to also thank everybody here for asking such excellent questions to Marguerite as well. And thank you for staying extra time. Marguerite, I know you expected to leave by 6, but it's just been such a wonderful conversation.
It has been. I appreciate it. It's good questions.
Really great questions. And if there's no further questions, we just want to thank you, you know, from the bottom of our heart for coming today and showing us your work. Such important work. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for, everybody that I know that's here and everybody that I don't know that's here. And thanks so much for inviting me. So wonderful to see everybody.